So welcome back. Sorry for the technical difficulties. And now, once again, I will hand over to our keynote speaker for today, Mr. Subroto Bagchi. Over to you.
Thank you once again, Dr. Brajesh Pant, Mr. Phuc Chong, my friends at Asian Development Bank, participants of the 9th International Skill Forum 2021. At the very outset, I want to express my gratitude for this keynote seat at this high table. As it was introduced, I come from the information technology industry where I co-founded Mindtree. And it wasn't until 2016 that I came into the world of skill development. This happened at the behest of the Honorable Chief Minister of Odisha, who wanted me to set up the Odisha Skill Development Authority. The charter at that point in time in 2016 was to create employable skills for 1.1 million youth, mostly school dropouts. Soon after I took charge, I was lucky to meet Dr. Brajesh Pant, who called me one day and invited me to address the 6th International Skill Forum. I did not quite think that I knew enough of this subject at that point in time, nor did I have the credentials despite the kind invitation. So I promised Dr. Pant that the day I felt that I had earned it, I would show up. Now, 5 years have gone by, and 5 years after, I believe I have seen a reasonable lot, worked alongside a great set of people on the ground, and I learned a few things that give me somewhat of a confidence to stand before you today. Today, I would like to share some of my lessons. And before I do that, knowing the national diversity of the conference attendees, I need to give you a sense of my state in the Union of India so that you can contextualize some of the things that I'm going to present to you. Odisha is in the eastern coast of India on the Bay of Bengal. We are roughly half the size of Vietnam in terms of physical size and roughly half its population. Compared to other Indian states, we are the 8th largest in area, 11th largest in terms of population, and the 16th in terms of GDP at something like $75 billion. When I was invited by the state in 2016, the target, as I said earlier, was to provide 1.1 million youth, mostly school dropouts, with some form of employable skill by the year 2019. Of these 1.1 million, 80% of the youth were to be given access to short-term employable skill training that would make them ready for jobs like sewing machine operators for the garment industry, entry-level workers in hospitality, retail, healthcare. Some people will be drivers, domestic electricians, and so on. Only 20% of the youth were to receive long-term TVET education that would be for 2 or 3 years in an ITI or a polytechnic. Now, to rehaul the skill initiatives that would cover this 1.1 million youth, we largely focused on a few things. But over these ensuing years, I learned an astonishing number of things that I had never known before, even as I had vainly considered myself to be a very well-informed person when it came to knowledge about my own country and the associated development issues. Let me give you a few examples because this has a very direct connection to the theme I've chosen to speak on today. Are we here to do skill development or are we here to facilitate human transformation? Why have we been sent here? What is the true North Star of our journey? So what was my point of ignorance? Before 2016, I did not know the meaning of terms like stunting and wasting. That India in 2019 would be home to the second highest number of stunted children in South Asia. That the number of children in India would be the highest among all the countries in South Asia. I did not know, for example, that 45 million children, probably between the age of 6 and 14, depending on various estimates, would be out of school. And as a result, even as someday they will join the employable skill force, they would be largely not formally skilled. According to the Human Development Report, only 20% of workers in India who are part of the labor force are skilled, and that puts us at the 129th place in a list of 162 countries. Only 7% of workers are engaged by the formal sector, and 93% work in the informal sector of the economy. What that really means is that 93% of our workers would not be on a proper payroll and would have no long-term benefits or employer commitment towards any form of subsequent career progression through skill development. And thanks to the bubble of the IT sector that I lived for 40 years of my life, I had no idea of the magnitude of wage disparity in my country, which is unimaginable in the developed world. This has not been addressed properly for the last 75 years in any meaningful way. Even today, we create state mandate on what is called minimum wages from time to time. And that phrase does not feel as something strange to our own ears, as something odd to us, minimum wages. Why minimum wage? Why not sustainable wage? Why not fair wage? Finally, I did not know about gender imbalance in the workforce of the country. Less than 20% workers in the organized sector in India happen to be women, and that number is shrinking compared to what it was last 5 years. And this must be seen in the broader context of the fact that we are a country of 1.3 billion people, and 50% roughly of that is basically women. And yet they are so grossly underrepresented in the workforce, organized workforce. Before you wonder why I'm speaking about these issues in a skill forum such as this, let me assure you that these are critical to the agenda on hand. Thought leaders, policymakers, and practitioners in the skills sector must keep these at the top of their mind in every discussion they have. These define the purpose before us. We must constantly see the big picture before we engage with policy, funding, implementation, review, and impact assessment. Without that big picture, we'll end up counting the trees and missing the forest. Worse still, we can be falsely self-congratulatory with the idea of skill development that falls short of the larger goal of human transformation, using skill as a lever in a world that is increasingly getting stratified at many different levels. Today, I want to share my thoughts with you at two levels. First, I want to link the issues that I just called out with the idea of skill development. Second, I want to share with you what I consider to be the shift all of us must make to truly create generational impact for our target group of humanity. Let us begin with the huge global challenge of stunting and wasting. Whether we want to keep our children in school or we want to work with those children who must be given skills and employable, we must squarely address the issue of nutrition. Here, I would like to share two use cases with you. We provide skill training to school dropouts to be employed as industrial sewing machine operators. Mostly they're girls. We do give them the entry-level skills, but we do not prepare them for the sheer physical hardship that employment would soon push their way. These girls go to work in an assembly line for 8 hours a day, where, leaving aside the regulated breaks that they're given, they must remain physically and mentally agile all the time. Yet, they're mostly anemic and iron deficient because growing up, they have not had good nutrition, even despite midday meal programs in many countries for early schoolers. They're not in the required physical condition in which they can work long hours in an industrial environment. The second use case. Recently, I visited an upcoming super scale high-tech manufacturing and assembly plant coming up in India, where they intend to employ a staggering 60,000 Tibet-trained workers by 2030. The fantastic news is that the organization intends to reserve 85% of this number for women. But the number one issue in mind of the head of the unit when I visited was how do they keep these young women in the level of physical fitness that would enable them to work 8-hour shifts. Mostly they would be required to stand. We need to serve nutrition to children in skill centers just as we feed athletes. Olympics is just over, so we'll be able to relate to the metaphor or the comparison with the athletes. Whereas an athlete needs the nutritional buildup for peak performance spanning a few years, the skill-trained youth would need to keep converting her current and her future skills over an entire lifetime to remain sustainably employed. And speaking about nutrition, the girl child is already at a disadvantage through early life discrimination. And when she arrives at a TVET institution, she is in the menstrual start of her life. She is nutritionally deficient and now must deal with physical challenges that the onset of female adulthood imposes on her. The nutrition agenda must be the cocoon in which skill development must be nested. Every country recruits young people to the defense and security forces and spends billions in feeding them so that they can remain fighting fit. But we need to do exactly that for our skilled trainees with special emphasis on the girl child. If girls eat well, one day the nation will eat well. When a kid reports to an ITI or a polytechnic in the morning, that kid must get a glass of milk, 2 eggs, and a banana before heading out to the workshop. And if it is a girl, the iron supplements that she badly needs. Without the nutrition, these children will have poor attention span, lack of comprehension capability, as well as poorer judgment. These abilities have been traditionally associated by us as things needed for staying in school and for going to college. Brain food is for the smart kid. I would argue we need brain food even more for skilled trainees. You do not want an attention deficient welder, attention deficient electrician, or a CNC machine operator, and not a judgment impaired paramedic. Future skills would require astonishingly higher neocortical engagement between the human brain and the machine. Let me now speak about 3 standalone pieces of data that I shared right in the beginning when I was bemoaning my ignorance at the start of my own journey in skill development. We are a country of 1.3 billion people. Data indicates that 45 million of our children are probably out of school today. We all know what the chances of their returning are to school once they have dropped out. This means that 45 million children must receive some form of skill education, skill training, so that they do not become a demographic liability. The skill infrastructure of the country must be continuously calibrated with 2 dashboard metrics. 1, the number of children that must be given employable skills, and 2, the number of jobs that are likely to be coming up in the future. Now that's common sense. But the creation of such a skill infrastructure is a daunting task, not because we are resource constrained, but because the laying of physical, digital, and the intellectual infrastructure are all planning and implementation intensive. The lag between the need and the ability to fulfill can take enormous amount of lag time and in the end can become suboptimal or even futile. The law of infrastructure creation is very simple. We must build a bridge before we can cross that bridge. The question is, what is the bridge that we must build? To begin with, we do not know for sure because we don't have the data all in one place. And let me explain that to you. I can, without much effort, tell you how much money India will spend on defense this year, how much on agriculture and railways, how much on building of roads and public health. But if you ask me what is the budgetary spend on skill development, I won't be able to tell you that. For me to drive home what this can lead to, I must give you an example. There are two short-term employment-linked flagship programs of India. One is under the Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship that has recently launched a slew of skill training programs under it, which is called PMKVY 3.0. This is mostly a non-residential 45-day program. Somewhat similar, but residential in nature, is a program called DDU-GKY that is run by the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development. The two have an annual budget outlay of under $1 billion. Is that less or is that more? We will only know if we can draw a baseline with credible numbers, not just by allocation, but by actual spend. But that baseline is just the beginning. The real task would be benchmark. We need to know what other aspirational nations are doing in the area. Just to give you another example, when you look at the 3 ITE centers that have been set up by the government of Singapore, each of the 3 ITE campuses have come up at an outlay of $1 billion each. So here we are talking about 2 large-scale national rollout, which annually don't add up to $1 billion. So that's the meaning of what I call out as benchmark. Now, let us imagine for a moment that we are Rip Van Winkle. We have just woken up, and behold, the 45 million out-of-school children are all skill trained. That we have the infrastructure that has made them so. But there's one glitch. 93% of the workforce is still in the informal sector. What does that mean to skilled workforce that we just created? For starters, it means that the wages are so low that there's little or no motivation to take up employment, little or no motivation to migrate to where work may be, and most importantly, to stay on the job for more than a year. We have to acknowledge migration as real. Most jobs are in the cities. But the 93% informal economy means abysmally poor wages when a youth comes to a city. Everyone exhorts that we need to constantly upskill and reskill ourselves to be future-proof. But we miss a cardinal point, and that is only a formal workplace would invest the time, the energy, and the money for any meaningful upskilling and reskilling. The informal economy does not have the resources and the incentives to be obsessed with workforce development. It simply is an impractical idea to a roadside repair shop, a small trader, or even a medium-scale manufacturing unit. Sustainable skill development happens only where payrolls exist. All of us need to deeply ask ourselves a very fundamental question. What structural changes must take place so that we can push more and more of the 93% jobs into the formal economy, into the payroll economy in the next decade? But in the meantime, in the interim, what interventions that we need to make so that some of the benefits, job-related benefits, particularly related to reskilling and upskilling, which are reserved for the formal economy, are brought into the informal economy. Folks, let me now come to the all-important issue, and that issue I alluded to in the beginning of my talk with you, which is about worker wages. I talked to you about the idea of minimum wages. Why minimum wages? Why not fair wages? Why not sustainably fair wages? After going through 2 years of post-high school TVET training, How much salary a young skill entrant may get in India? Well, in Singapore, I'm told it is 34,000 Singapore dollars if you are a student who has just finished a 2-year program in ITE. In India, if the individual is lucky, it would be about 10,000 rupees a month, and that translates to about 2,400 Singapore dollars. So 34,000 Singapore dollars for an ITE kid and $2,400 Singapore dollars for a kid who's come out of an ITI in India, a full 93% less. There are two caveats that we must acknowledge. One caveat is that the ITE graduate from Singapore is obviously better skilled because she was trained on a better machine by a better trainer. And then, of course, for the Indian counterpart, we also have to keep in mind what economists will tell us is the purchasing power parity. But even then, the real question before us is this: what good is 10,000 rupees, even in a country like India, for someone who needs a new start in life? Can a young person, fresh from an ITI, move to a job to a city where he or she can rent a room with electricity and a toilet with running water with a wage of 10,000 rupees? The answer is a big no. For most skilled trained workers who need to migrate to Indian cities in search of any work, life will start in the ghetto, which is a dangerous place for anyone, and even more so if the skilled trained youth is a woman. 75 years into independence, a skilled trained youth, if lucky, would start life with the mandated quote-unquote minimum wages. At 34,000 Singapore dollars, a young person can rent a safe, comfortable place, commute to work in safety and comfort, save money for the future, think of higher education, and even plan a family down the line. And the same person in India will not be able to do so. Folks, Singapore is Singapore because the Prime Minister and the plumber have the same quality of electricity at home and drink from the same supply of water. For us to cross the chasm, we need to replace the minimum wage mindset with sustainable wages and fair wages. The wage disparity in my country is so big, it devours every other imperative like a big blue whale eating planktons and simply moving on. Our wage structure, periodically government, but vastly unregulated, has moved people from what I call poverty to respectable poverty. We need to make a tectonic shift from that. And skill development only then can have a substantive and not a symbolic impact on human development. I have noticed today with great satisfaction that the structure of the 9th International Skill Forum is one of the best curated that I have ever seen. I have no doubt all of us will come back with tremendous new ideas, call for action. But I do submit to all of us that we examine all the learnings, all the knowledge that we harvest through 3 lenses as we build a blueprint for the future. These 3 lenses are: 1, need for maximalism; 2, the importance of greater input orientation; and finally, to build a system approach when we are looking at large-scale human transformation. Let me spend a little time on that. For starters, we need to move from a minimalistic mindset to a maximalistic mindset. We think large screen when it comes to most development issues, but when it comes to skill development, for the kid standing outside the training center, we are very happy with incrementalism. This is true of everything, from the infrastructure that we create all the way to sustainable wages. It doesn't trouble us. We do not find a flaw in our thinking because those children are not our children. And no policymaker and no administrator was ever a skill trainee. This call for maximalism is no rhetoric. We are doing no one a favor by making a sharp departure from the past. All we must do is to pick up one child, one kid in a skill training center and go back 5 generations. And then we build a picture of what time that these 5 families traveled and what did they go through until this kid was born. And suddenly the truth will dawn on us that these people over generations have not known social inclusion. They were never economically mainstream. They were the fringe people. Successive generations lost the proverbial lottery of the womb, and now we have this boy or this girl on our hand. But given the right skills and led on to the outcome of sustainable wages with a good employer, we can cut that chain with the past that spans many hundreds of years of living in the shadow of things. The second point I would like to place before you is the need for shifting from an entirely outcome-oriented mindset to an input-driven approach in creating skill interventions. We are obsessed with numbers, and we should be. But obsession with the wrong set of numbers would land us at the temple of the false god. A classic case in point is the massive short-term skill development programs that are run by mostly a set of ragtag training outfits that are paid their full dues only when they can produce proof of employment for 70% of the people that got trained under a government funding scheme. What that really means is that the training agency must produce 3 successive months of payroll stub for every trainee so that the agency will get paid. But look, did we not just admit that 93% of our jobs are in the informal economy where payrolls don't even exist? When it comes to raising our own children, we obsess over measuring inputs. We fret about the quality of nutrition, the vaccination, the right clothing for the right season, the holidays, the pocket money, the after-school private coaching class, this paid sports activity. It is inputs, inputs, inputs all the way. But to turn to skill development, which is sustainable, which leads to human transformation, we need to fret over not the output metrics, which are generationally relevant and developmentally inconsequential. Instead of 70% placement, we should be obsessing with the quality of training agencies. We should be obsessing about substantially improving their own capacity so that they have the motivation to really do a good job. The last point I would like to make is that in engaging with the idea of skill development, we must go all the way. You cannot give me so-called skills. You have to future skill me. You cannot give future skills and leave me at the door of a largely informal economy. You cannot skill me and not show me sustainable fair wages. You cannot simply skill me and say that safe and comfortable worker housing is not your priority. I'm fine where I live in poverty. There at least I see known faces. Don't skill me, uproot me, then send me 1,000 miles away to an unfriendly city and say, don't ever look back. I won't be there for you. Folks, our job is to set the bird free and not just increase the size of the cage. We policymakers, regulators, skill institutions have a unique chance to fix the generational human inequity. We must ask ourselves, why have we been sent here? Are we here to build bricks or are we here to build temples? The former, building bricks, is the narrative of skill development, and the latter is the story of human transformation. Thank you for the honor of addressing this August gathering. Each one of you is making a difference, and I salute you, because without you, the world would be a more difficult place for the people I work with and the people I work for. Thank you very much, and best wishes for great outcomes of this International Skill Forum.
Thank you so much, Subroto Bagchi, for these very excellent and very personal remarks and stories. I personally also liked your perspective on wages and also introducing the three lenses we should maintain for this forum. Thank you so much. And I would like to announce a 1-minute break of our live stream. We are going to be back